Hello and welcome. I don't usually do tech reviews. I'm more like reviewing people. But as a filmmaker who has been using the 1DC for a while now, I wanted to compare my camera to Canon's latest flagship, the 1DX Mark III. This review is not comprehensive and feel free to skip to the part of your choice by following the links in the description. One key question is is the 1DC still relevant in 2020? Well, back in the days, I needed photography, video and durability in the same package. And by this I mean I needed a camera which can do sports and at the same time could withstand weather conditions such as in the Amazonian forest, sand deserts or blizzards at -20°C. And when I travel, I usually do it in full autonomy with 25 kg of equipment on my back, and this excluding the camera kit. It meant 1DC. And this thing still does like 4K, it has Canon log, it does 60p at 1080, it's weather resistant, and very important, in my case there is no recording time limit. Very useful when, like me, you work at universities and you have to record conferences. I wanted to share with you my impressions, but at the same time key insights about differences that you can only tell if you put your hands on. And let's get started with still pictures and the autofocus system. The 1DC has 61 autofocus points. The 1DX Mark III has 191 points. However, if you superimpose the viewfinders, you'll find that they cover approximately the same area. One really good thing though is the autofocus smart controller, meaning that if you use the AF on button, you can just slide your finger on it to select your autofocus area, and that's a massive improvement. So on paper, the 1DC has an autofocus sensitivity of -2 EVs, while the 1DX Mark III has a sensitivity of -4 EVs. So 2 stops difference makes the 1DX Mark III 4 times more sensitive in low light conditions than the 1DC. I wanted to check if both cameras could focus in 3 different areas. First one at the right, the patch of grass just under the street light. Second, the bench in the middle of the picture. And third, these very dark areas with the trees. So without any surprise, both cameras managed to focus very easily on the patch of grass under the street light. However, only the 1DX Mark III manages to focus correctly on the bench, and both fail when it comes to this shaded area by the trees. However, now with the 1DX Mark III you can autofocus in live view actually since the Mark II. And this tool is revolutionary. You can focus virtually anywhere provided your image is bright enough, because it's based on contrast. So here I'm trying to focus on this very dark area with a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second, and the camera fails. When I change the shutter speed to 1/8 of a second, it focuses without any problems. Now for the image quality, so both cameras deliver 14 bits raw data, and I've processed them with Adobe Camera Raw. Before that, I made sure that I disabled any corrections, noise reductions, anti-flicker mode, highlight tone priority, whatever, and I've set them on the same shutter speed and aperture. First, for the highlights recovery. So I've chosen this scene with a very high contrast, so the highlights are very bright and the shadows are really dark. So both cameras at normal exposure manage really well. When I overexpose this scene by 3 stops, both cameras struggle and they recover approximately the same amount of data. Now for the shadows recovery, I've chosen a different scene, much darker, with black flat surfaces very prone to noise, and I've underexposed the scene by 3 stops. Now they both perform very well. However, a key difference, the 1DX Mark III manages to produce a much cleaner image with a finer noise. Now let's go back to the night scene and test with the correct exposure the ISO speeds between 3200 and the maximum. So here are the results at ISO 3200, now 6400, now 12800, then 25600, then 51200, then 102 and 400, and then a 204 and 800. So once again, both cameras perform quite similarly. I estimate I can produce usable images up to ISO 25600. Above this value, there's just too much noise. However, one key difference is that it seems the 1DX Mark III retains more details in the pictures than the 1DC. But overall, I would say it's almost like the 1DX Mark III is they've taken the 1DC and just extended the ISO range. But before we switch to video, a couple of extra features, and the first one is the burst mode. Let's remember, the 1DC can take up to 12 images per second in RAW with autofocus, but this under certain conditions only, meaning that you have to shoot at full aperture, at shutter speeds faster than 1,000th of a second, and at ISO speeds below 25,600. Otherwise, your frame rate drops to 10 frames per second. On the other hand, the 1DX Mark III manages to shoot up to 16 frames per second with autofocus in RAW and with unlimited buffer, and if you shoot in live view, it's up to 20 frames per second. And one extra thing I'd like to notice is the shutter sound. On the 1DX Mark III, it sounds much quieter, warmer and crunchier than the 1DC. And I'll skip the silent shutter function because on both cameras, well, it sounds like a joke. So overall for photography, I think both cameras perform really well with a slight edge for the 1DX Mark III. So on the 1DX Mark III for video, you have some really interesting additions, and one of them is the ability to film with using shutter speeds longer than 1/30th of a second. With the 1DX Mark III, you can film with shutter speeds up to 1/8 of a second, so the result is very blurry, but you gain 2 stops compared to the 1DC. One addition as well is the time it takes for the 1DX Mark III to turn on. When you turn the camera on, it's almost instantly turning on video mode. The other feature is the touch screen. If like me you work in wet conditions or under the snow, you want to know if your touch screen is gonna be responsive to wet fingers, and it does. However, when it comes to gloves, well, it's a big fail. Maybe an improvement for the next model. Now, another important video feature is the autofocus in live view, and this is really game-changing. As I mentioned earlier with photography, this is basically you can autofocus the camera anywhere you like in almost any light conditions, provided you have the right settings, so it keeps focus on where you want it to focus. And as a reminder, the 1DC doesn't have autofocus for videos at all. One feature I really like as well is the ability to do smooth transitions if you change the exposure. So back in the days, either you would have this, like if you change the aperture or the shutter speed while recording, you would have this sudden change that you can immediately notice, except if you use a cine lens where you can change the aperture just by turning the ring. If you set your exposure in TV or AV mode, it will do the calculation itself to keep the same exposure and do the transitions very smoothly. One noticeable difference is that it makes use of the full area of the sensor. And this is perhaps the biggest difference between the two models. The 1DX Mark III makes use of the full area of the sensor, meaning that a 24mm field of view in still pictures will be a 24mm field of view in video. With the 1DC, when you shoot in 4K, there is a 1.3 crop factor, meaning that if you shoot with a 24mm lens, it will look like a 31mm lens. And for videos, let's not forget the ability to record in full HD at 100 frames per second. Now for the image quality. So I've compared my 1DC, which shoots in 8-bit 422 MJPEG codec, and I've selected the intra-frame compression with the 1DX Mark III, which does either 10 bits 422 HEVC, same, I've selected intra-frame compression, and 12 bits RAW. So I've graded and compared the footage with DaVinci Resolve 16.2 because this is one of the very first NLEs able to work with the 1DX Mark III RAW data files. However, the software cannot process the MP4s in HEVC yet, so I had to convert the files with Virtual Dub to keep the 10 bits 422. Let's hope that very soon all the major NLEs will be up to date. So the first difference you would notice with the leap from 8 bits to 10 bits video is the absence of banding. As you can see in this footage with the 1DC, if you shoot at smooth gradients, it will produce in certain circumstances some banding. On the 1DX Mark III, whether it's with the 10 bits HEVC footage or the RAW, I didn't have any issues at all. Now for image quality. For high contrast situations with the same scene as before, both cameras in video managed to render the scene really well. Now for highlights recovery, I didn't expect much difference between still pictures, so they recover approximately the same amount of data in highlights. Now for shadows recovery. Both cameras can manage to recover the shadows. However, if I zoom into the noisy areas, the 1DX Mark III delivers a cleaner noise than the 1DC. I didn't manage to do the same with the raw footage, but I guess maybe I was using the wrong Canon log setting. Now let's take the same scene and compare the noise levels. So here it is at ISO 3200, now 6400, 12800, 25,600, 51,200, and above this value I can only shoot in HEVC with the 1DX Mark III. In my opinion, both cameras can produce potentially usable footage up to ISO 12,800, maybe with a bit of noise reduction. However, if we look at the noisy areas in the picture, the 1DX Mark III again delivers a cleaner picture than the 1DC. When you shoot video, there is a factor you cannot escape, and this is battery life. So I've put both cameras to the test with same settings, ISO 400, because it's the native ISO for both. Shutter speed 1/50th of a second, full aperture, and brightness of the LCD to the minimum, and I've tested both with the latest LPE19 to be fair, because you have only like a 10% difference between the previous LPE4N. For this test, the 1DC achieved 167 minutes, which is 2 hours and 47 minutes exactly. And the 1DX Mark III manages to film up to 281 minutes, which is 4 hours and 41 minutes. That's almost 5 hours. This is like insane. Now for the verdict. In terms of still photography, as expected, I didn't find much differences between the two cameras, whether it is in the data recovery or in how they perform at high ISO. However, the 1DX Mark III has a slight edge in some circumstances. But again, in my opinion, you need to pixel peep to see these differences. However, the 1DX Mark III shines when it comes to some features, such as the burst frame rate or the autofocus sensitivity in low light and control. It makes it a fast, responsive and practical camera to use. And last but not least, there is also on the 1DX Mark III a considerably reduced shutter lag. So with the 1DX Mark III, Canon finally introduced RAW video in a DSLR 10 years after Magic Lantern. It was about time. But in terms of image quality, so I was expecting something around like one-stop improvement for the amount of data we can recover from highlights and shadows or the noise performance. Remember, I like to think that we're like 3 generations apart, 8 years between the 1DC and the 1DX Mark III, but again, this is my opinion. On the practical level, the things I really like with the 1DX Mark III are first the live view autofocus, that's really life-saving. I like the smooth transitions when you change the exposure while recording in AV. I like having access to the full area of the sensor. I find the image to be much crispier and sharper. This is mainly due to the resolution on the 1DX Mark III, but you don't have banding. And this is one of the things, unfortunately, that is sometimes annoying with the 1DC, is that, yeah, in smooth gradients, you will find banding. But if you want to benefit from it, you'll have to invest in CF Express cards, which can be north of £500 or dollars. So if you're about to upgrade to a flagship camera with Canon, I would say go for it. Hopefully this camera will last you at least 10 years time. But if, like me, you have a 1DC or a 5D with Magic Lantern, and you don't have the finances, I would say it's fine to wait until the prices drop. And as a commentary, and that's the sociologist in me, we're made to believe that we need the latest tech, that the client needs the latest tech. It's not always true. And let's remember that the 1DC has been used in movie sets such as for the Avengers movies and was said to be on par with Arri Alexa, and that's not a small statement. And to be honest, to have a camera which is still relevant in the industry 10 years almost after its release in the era of planned obsolescence, like, really hats off. You know, it's like for movies, you have like cult movies like Fight Club. They were a commercial failure, but still 25 years on, they're still relevant. I think a Canon 1DC is one of these cameras. Commercial failure, but still produces a really decent job. And also, not everyone is able to afford upgrading a flagship camera every 4 years. You can check some online reviews like Dave at Kinotica or Armando, who reviewed the 1DC in 2019 and compare it to the C200, for example. But if you already own one of these 1DC, well, I'm not sure it's really worth investing the money and into the storage space for a 1DX Mark III. Unless, of course, you need the very specific features of the 1DX Mark III. In that case, you can alternatively rent it or find another camera with very specific features. On my end, of course, I'm keeping my 1DC. I wish, yes, it had better performance in low light with the autofocus. I had like 10 bits, a different codec for avoiding the banding. But just like, let's think simply. Am I annoyed? Yes, I am. But does it prevent me from working and delivering to clients? Absolutely not. I'm all about investing even like into something more expensive, but with the aim of making this thing last like as long as possible. And that was my aim when I invested in the 1DC. Well, I had it secondhand because it was like crazy expensive when it was released, like $50,000. But I'm really happy to see that this camera has aged really well and is still relevant in 2020 for industry standards. So thanks so much for watching, but please do not subscribe to my channel. I don't do tech reviews. I review people and problems in the society. That's not exactly the same thing. I have 2 full-time jobs. Filmmaking is one of them, but my main thing is research and sociology. I was hoping to share my experience so you can have more information about these cameras. So I hope this video was helpful. Choose your tech wisely, and until next time.